the internet gives us a space to export our own emotional labor onto strangers. And
Mm,
so what's easy is to say, oh, I don't believe in purity culture anymore. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell everyone who's in there, stop believing it, right? And there's something to that, right? But also the work is, oh, well, let me search and make sure that I can heal and undo and liberate all the parts of me that are still wrapped up in that.
Too often, Black women are a mere afterthought in conversations around wellness, but not in this space. On this podcast, the dialogue is always centered around women like you. Welcome to the podcast, but more importantly, welcome to the tribe. Be well, sis. So today I am super excited to have the author of Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the problematic people in our lives are the ones that we love, Brit Barron. Brit, how are you today? And the way that I ask it now is I want people to really reflect, how are they doing? Not giving a reflexive answer. So how are you? PMS. So physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Oh, great question. Okay, I love that. You know, before you said that, I was prepared to just be like, "Great, how are you?" um, which is kind of just the what we do, I guess.
Yep.
Um, I'm doing pretty good overall. I think so. I'm in Los Angeles, and this is like peak. We're having a great. We're not in a heat wave. It's just like nice summer days that are like warm
Nice.
and sunny, but it's not too. Which just it does boost my mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yep.
okay, I can go outside. I'm not gonna burn up, but I'm gonna get a nice sun, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like physically, mentally the sun is helping me out. And I feel
Good.
good about that.
Good.
Um yeah, feeling pretty grounded, pretty connected.
I love that.
Overall, I'm giving
I love it.
8.59 out of 10.
Oh, that's really good. Okay, I love that for you. You mentioned how the weather is in LA. So right now I'm in Florida, and every year we do the same things to ourselves. Like, why do we come to Florida in August? It's a swamp out here. The humidity is ridiculous. So I'm jealous of your good weather, but I'm happy for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, humidity, it's tough.
Yeah, you can't sweat.
Yeah.
It's just oppressive heat. But anyway, let's go ahead
Yeah.
and hop and talk about your book again. Do you still talk to grandma? So one of the things, there are so many things in this book that are super timely, that you were discussing things that happened in 2020, but it's like we are on repeat. It's the same stuff, right? That's coming up
Mm-hmm.
in the political landscape, that's coming up in interpersonal relationships because of the political landscape. But one thing that I really wanted to touch on is you discussed a bit about growing up in a religious household and growing up in the church, and just the conflict, in a way, if that's the right way to say it, that you experienced navigating your own identity with or against their anti-LGBTQ doctrine. So if we
Mm-hmm.
can start there, yeah,
Yeah.
how was that? How did you navigate it, overcome it, and all of those things for people who are listening?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, like most people, you kind of grow up into whatever sort of traditions, ideologies, theologies that your family has, right? So,
Yep.
um, mine was very evangelical Christian, and I was very committed to that, and really found a home inside of that world. So, church, was where I had my friends, where I had community, and then ultimately, that's where I ended up working. So I became a pastor in my mid late 20s. And so I had this experience where the more I started to learn about myself, the less I would be able to be connected to that community.
Yep.
Um, and I think something that made that so difficult was it wasn't just a place I went on Sundays, right? This was a whole way of understanding the world. It was a sense of belonging and community. It was my actual job and paycheck. It was, all of these things that I had known were wrapped up inside of conforming to the ideals that this community held to. So it was tough to be faced with a question, but ultimately the question was, is my life a reflection of who I want to be, or is it a response to these people I don't want to disappoint and this sense of belonging that I've created? And those are tough questions.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things, I grew up in a similar situation where a lot of my identity was wrapped up in the church because I literally was there like 4 times a week. There was always something to do, part of this committee, the choir, like leading children's club, like all of those things, right? But I learned a lot of things that as an adult I had to unlearn. And one of the things that I'm and I'm still struggling with, if I'm being honest, is the fact that I don't raise my kids in the church because I want them to skip that step of having to unlearn things about maybe themselves or just the world and people around them. So as of today, do you still consider yourself to be Christian or religious, or have your values and ideals maybe change in that regard?
I've had such a journey of experience in initially leaving the church, and it was such a sort of traumatic break. I was like, okay, you're off to the side.
Yeah.
But in the recent years, I've done a lot of reclaiming of my faith in a way that makes sense for me. So I'm sort of a believer that every person, every human being, we just need a way of life that works for us. We need, if it's family values, if it's we need something that helps us make meaning out of our time here.
Yeah.
And so I talked to a lot of my friends are in similar spots. And one of my friends put it this way, which I always loved, is he said, Christianity will always be my first language. In that, those were just the stories from my childhood. And so where I'm at now is I still feel so comforted and challenged and moved by those stories. I think being able to separate sort of the problem with, Christianity in our context, right, in my context, is it's the stories, it's these like narratives and this myth and these beautiful and this poetry, but then it's like tied into like sort of these larger systemic ills, if you will, right? There's patriarchy and white Christian nationalism and all of these things that are like intertwined with it. And so being able to sort of distill and say, I want nothing to do with any of that, but these actually are the stories of my childhood, and I still get to find some beauty and truth in them, in a way that makes sense for my life and the way that I want to move in the world. So, and it's kind of funny. I kind of get asked a lot, like, are you still a Christian? And I'm like, who even knows what that means? You know what I mean? It's like, sure, there's a lot of politicians out there that would say they're Christian, and I would say that we're not on the same page.
Right.
So I don't know as much if it's about those labels, but I do still find a lot of beauty and goodness and truth in those stories, and in the narratives.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's where I am too. Like that is my foundation. But yeah, there's been some relearning, unlearning of some things, and it's part of my evolution. Yeah. I think about, and we're going to step away from this, but I think about how growing up, so lots of Bible, in particular the Old Testament, and one of the themes in your book was just to look beyond the binary thinking. Is it black? Is it white? Is it right? Is it wrong? And how life really is in the spectrum in the middle, right? And I think about how my upbringing, because we spent so much time focused on the Old Testament, which is very like this or that, up or down, like there really is no gray space. How did you come to accept the gray in life, and that there isn't a right or a wrong or a left or a right all the time, right? I think that's something that I'm literally unpacking in therapy right now, because my thinking is very this or that, and that's harmful, like personally.
Yeah. Well, I think so much of it came down to the reality that every time I tried to cleanly put something in that box, usually it wasn't true. I'd have to be manipulating the information somehow to make it make sense. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't. And there's really no way to avoid the gray space. So even in this whole journey of like coming out and leaving church and having this horrible experience, I still could not with any integrity say that was a completely bad experience, because it wasn't. There were these moments and these conversations and certain relationships that I still cherish from that. So then I'm like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean it was good? And I'm like, if I stop asking myself those questions, then I'm allowed to just sit with the grief and the joy, the pain and you know what I mean? I'm able to hold those in tandem. And I think that just came from trying so hard to make the binary work and intellectually just not even being able to, because it doesn't make sense, right? And so I think it's a little unnerving to get into that gray space. But it's actually, I think it gives us more continuity in understanding life, to say, I just feel better about owning that it's not one thing or the other. And the trick is, and this is something I talk about in the book, I think so much of our pull towards that, in something being able to be all good or all bad, is because we want to be all good. So if it's possible to exist fully on the right side of the line, then actually that's where I can be. And then if I could do that, then I don't have to worry about like all of the nuance and the complexities of what it means to be a human, because I'm finally fully on the right side of the line.
Ooh. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Ooh, that's good. And going back to how, when I read the opening of the book, it was talking about something that happened in 2020, a conversation that you had with somebody who has a large platform similar to yours, and how it made you like rethink, not conversation, but like relationships with other people and things. And again, we are right back in the same space. One, I am frustrated because it's like, do we not learn anything? I thought that the summer of 2020 would bring about some type of real change. And here we are 4 years later in the same situation. So for those who are in themselves, maybe now for the first time experiencing conflict within their relationship, people that they love and respect and all of those things, but now they're seeing that they do not have the same values or just the same outlook on things, right? Big things that matter. Where do we even start? If I am that person who's realizing, ooh, yeah, grandma can be harmful.
Yeah, she's saying some stuff.
Right.
It's really tough, and it's exponentially harder in an election year, right? And that's just true because there's 3 other years we've had since 2020 that felt a little more like okay, because we're not at each other's throats in the same way. But one of the things that I talk a lot about in the book, and I'm not a believer that you have to be in relationships with every single person who you've ever had a relationship with. But I do think that we are able to gain a little bit more compassion, empathy, and understanding when we can remind ourselves of the places we've been before now. And so I call this in the book, I call it progressive amnesia, where you kind of learn something new and then you kind of live as if you've always known it. And so what can be a tendency for someone like me, right, who now I'm in this experience where I'm just this like out, very proud, very queer woman, have a beautiful wife, my life here in LA. And it would be nice to imagine that I came out of the womb being like, just fight the power. When the reality is, for a long time, I perpetrated the same narratives that were oppressive to me. Because I know what it felt like to be comfortable and safe in that ideology. I know how comfortable that chair was in that space. And so I like to say that never changes the work. The work is always the same. The systems need to come down. The oppression needs to turn into liberation. The transformation needs to happen. I just think our approach to the work changes when we can have empathy and understanding for how someone maybe got there, right? So
Yeah.
we have differences usually with our family members because we have evolved out of something and they are not evolving at the same rate. But it's helpful sometimes for me to remember that you also sat once where they stood. Yeah. And so, and then even thinking back to, okay, well, how did I evolve, right? What did my, I would love to say that I was anti-LGBT and had, mountains of internalized homophobia. And I would love to say that what got me out of that was someone in the comments being like, that's stupid. And then I was like, oh my gosh, great. I'm liberated. Right. It's just not actually how it happened. There's just so much complexity, I think, in human relationships and human evolution that I always think about when I'm encountering these people in my life who aren't at the same place I am. I just think about, okay, how did I get here? And okay, what are the things and what are the conversations and how can this person hear me? How do they feel like they need to be heard? How can I meet them in authenticity? And if I can't, I always say, if I can't hold space for someone, then I need to create space. Because what are we going to, I'm not just going to go at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're going to both be blue in the face. But if I can feel like I can hold space for you and you can hold space for me, then I'm always down to come to the table.
Fair. One of the things that is frustrating because I'm thinking about, like, for example, in online spaces, like you'll have this person who is more evolved and they know more and yada yada, and they're just like, either if it's a video, they're like talking down on you, or like the comments are snarky, and it's like, okay, like to your point, we didn't always know the things that we know now. And I just wish I can just like get on a platform and say, if you are evolved and you know more and you know the right path forward, whatever you think that is, you being condescending is not going to get people on your side or get people to understand. Because my walls come up, because why? No, you know what I mean? So I think it's important for us to carry on in our regular lives too.
Yeah. And I always think about that sometimes. I'm like, okay, what is the goal? Is the goal liberation? Right. If the goal is liberation, then I don't need to come at someone, you know what I mean? Like that, it feels messy when you're like, are you just trying to tell me that you're better than me? Right. Because what is that? What's the goal for that? And I joke that this disproportionately impacted white women in 2020, but it was funny that you had so many women who for the first time like realized that racism existed. And so they get swept into this thing and they realize that all of this is true on a Monday, right? And by Thursday, they're online like, yeah, and some of you don't understand privilege, and I'm like, wait, the books you ordered haven't even arrived at your house yet. Like you just got into this conversation. And I think the discomfort is the step we want to skip. Like you want to go straight from, I didn't know racism existed and I probably perpetrated in that system and misused my privilege and power. And you want to go straight from that to, well, it doesn't matter because I'm helping now. And I think there's a very important middle spot of like, I should sit with that discomfort, and that should transform the way I engage in the work.
Yeah. I think that's a cultural thing. I think in our culture, in American culture, we are not taught to sit with anything. We're taught to push past it. As kids, we fall off our bike, scrape our knee. Yeah, we're going to survive, but like, let the kid cry for a second. And I'm guilty of this. I'll tell my kid, dust it off. You're good. And it just teaches us that no, don't sit with anything uncomfortable. Just keep pushing past it, keep work through it. And so the person who got that book the book is still on its way and it's online, like maybe even selling a course at this point, who knows? Like they're just trying to keep pushing, to work through whatever they're feeling. I have a question though. So if I had some internalized whatever, right? And I was
Mm-hmm.
harmful to people and to spaces based off of my own ideology. And then later on, a couple years later, I've grown, I've learned, and I see how harmful that was. Sometimes it's shameful, right? To think back, like, oh my goodness, like the people that I absolutely love and want liberation for, I was in their way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How do we
Mm-hmm.
sit with that? Because again, we don't like to sit with discomfort.
Yeah, no, that sucks for sure. I'm right there. I'm right there. I'm in that spot. And I think about that a lot, right? A lot of the woes of evangelicalism that now I will spend so much of my work like actually trying to dismantle.
Mhm.
I was right there building the brick by brick,
Mhm.
and purity culture is like has terrorized people's lives. Like
Yes.
it has been the like a pervasive evil,
Yes.
and probably every single friend I know now who is like gone from the church, moved on, deconstructed their faith,
Mhm.
married, got kids, still processing what purity culture has done.
Yeah.
Now, I very much was there. Like
Mhm.
I was talking to young girls, I was, you know, given the propaganda, the message, perpetrating. Like I think about that all the time. Like there could be someone in therapy, some girl who was like, when I was in college, my college pastor told me this, and they're talking about me. They're in there processing things that I said to them, and that is horrifying,
Mhm.
and extremely humbling. And I always want that reality to be shaping the way I approach the work because something I see a lot in comment sections, particularly on the internet. If I was to take away the actual letters and words of the comments, the only thing I see in here is I feel shame and I want you to feel it too. I'm hurting and
Mm.
I want you to hurt too. Um, and some of the vitriol I think that we experience, because at the end of the day, there are real evils in the world. There is real oppression, and we need true and authentic liberation for those
Yes.
things. And there's a passion behind that. And I think what we are noticing is there's a difference between vitriol and justified passion. And so I
Mm.
think one of those things that keeps us on those lines is being able to sit with our own shame and hurt and to say
Yeah.
like, hey, I want liberation for you because I found liberation for me and I know how harmful it was. And I found liberation not only from those ideologies, but also from the shame of being caught up in them. And you kind of have to do that twofold to be able to, I think, extend something that is authentic. But it
Yeah.
definitely sucks.
Yeah, it sucks, and it's complicated, and it's like years,
Mm-hmm.
and you touched on the purity culture, and I've been in therapy for years, and now that I'm raising boys and just raising children in general, I'm just realizing how pervasive the purity culture was in me because I want my kids to be just really open and whoever they are, like they are good, right? And to understand themselves
Mm-hmm.
and the world around them. And part of me kind of feels like because I was raised in a very like this is right, this is wrong. I thought I was okay. I'm not okay because I'm still like torn. Like am I teaching them the right thing? I know in my head, in a way, and in my heart that it's the right thing, but also up here, it's just like, what if you're leading them astray? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
the church did
You
a
know,
number. Mm-hmm.
they really did. And what's I think uniquely difficult about deconstructing our faith in some of these ideologies is that when we think about the reality of what it means to be a good person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, remember, our binary thinking told us that there was a way to fully exist on the right side of the line, and the church was a big perpetrator of that. So the church said, here are the things you can pray, here are the books you can read, here are all the things you can fall in line with. And if you do that, you never have to wonder about being good. You will always land on the right side of the line.
Yep.
When the reality is, I mean, to be human is to find those edges in a myriad of ways and to get your heart broken and to break hearts, to
Mm-hmm.
stand for what's right, to oops, I didn't mean to say that, to sort of and even I think in parenting, and I say this with absolutely a grain of salt as someone with no children, but I think what I've noticed in my community and people around me who are parenting, there is, and I think it is a little bit of some leftovers from our faith, because most of my friends grew up in that. There is this pressure to, I need to parent in the right way.
Yes.
And I have to get it right. And I'm like, oh, no, that's actually the same root of the thing that we're trying to leave, right? That there is this reality of like, okay, I need to tell my kids the exact right things about their body. And I'm like, that's not possible, But we still have this idea that we can do everything right, and that's actually the standard. And that's purity culture in a different form.
Oh my goodness. I gotta take this to my therapist. Like my mind is blown. I'm sitting here, I'm like literally starting to sweat. I'm just like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
It is.
Wow.
And that's why I think there's and I say this again in the book, I think that the internet gives us a space to export our own emotional labor onto strangers. And so what's easy is to say, oh, I don't believe in purity culture anymore. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell everyone who's in there, stop believing it, right? And there's something to that, right? But also the work is, oh, well, let me search and make sure that I can heal and undo and liberate all the parts of me that are still wrapped up in that. I think it just gives us, again, it gives us a different kind of empathy when we begin to approach people who are still sort of held captive by those narratives.
Yeah, so navigating for sure. Would you feel comfortable discussing your journey coming out and how that affected your relationship with the people who were in your life who are part of the church?
Yeah, I mean, it was a journey for sure. I came out a little bit later in life, so I was 30. And so I think at that point, anyone in your life who thinks you might come out, they're probably like, okay, we're probably past that. We're probably past that hub. People always ask how my parents responded, and I was like, genuinely, they were very surprised at first. Like, they were very surprised, and that makes sense, because they're like, wait, what? You're like, fully grown. But navigating those, it was very hard. And I don't, this might make sense to you because you grew up in the church too. But it felt oddly selfish. Like, it created so many ripples, and it disrupted so many things that a constant question I would ask myself is like, do I deserve to be doing this just so I can be happy when it's causing all of this chaos? And that was tough, because then I'm in therapy, and shout out to my therapist, the one reason we all made it through.
Yes.
And I'm really asking questions like, am I worth causing this amount of chaos? And just for me to be happy, because your own happiness isn't priority when you grow up in the church,
Absolutely not. It's how do you serve the church and serve people around you.
So it started to trick my brain to be like, well, if this is what sin does, right? You're like, this is what it does. It tricks you into thinking only you matter and only your happiness, and
You're
so there was a lot of
this and that. Yep.
And people are gonna do this, and people are, and the one of the pastors that I worked for just had a full meltdown when I told him, and which is funny because he's a very grown man. But one of the things he said, he was like, do you know how many people you are going to lead astray from the Lord? And I was like, ooh, that kind of hit. Like, in the moment, it kind of hit, Now I'm like, get out of here,
Right. Boy, bye.
But in the moment, I was like, and so it was a journey. And again, like I say, not to sound like a broken record, but sometimes I think about, like, I thought every single day for years, I thought about the reality of my sexuality every single day. And so I think about the fact that when I told my parents, I had this pressure on everyone responding a certain way immediately. and I also had to sit with, I don't know how fair that is because it took me years in weekly therapy and thinking about it every single day till I was even okay with it.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Yeah.
it was so many emotions all at the same time, that I think I'm glad I got to sit with.
So, one thing that I have been doing lately is I go on the forums for everything. So I'm on Reddit for everything. I don't Google anymore. I Reddit. And because I'm on Reddit a lot, I found a story that I want to share with you, and I want to get your opinion. It's a coming out story, and the question was about it's pretty much one of those "Am I the assholes?" And I would love to get your opinion. There's a new segment that we're doing for things that may relate to the conversation. I would love to get the expert's opinion. How does that sound?
Ooh, yeah, I like this.
All right. Okay. So the title says, "Am I the asshole for telling my sister that our parents don't have to agree with her relationship?" So, my 21-year-old female sister isn't accepted by my parents for being gay. A throwaway counts. My friend doesn't get back to me. Okay, so for some context, my little sister is a lesbian. Our family does not support her decisions, but I don't give a F who she sleeps with. When she came out, she was distanced from the family, but we started talking again after finding out our father is dying. After things in the family became rocky, for such a long time, we decided to all get together at my parents' house. My dad said he wanted to put all of the drama and bickering aside, and if we have a problem with each other, we can wait it out until he passes. Wow. Everyone agrees, including my sister, so I was expecting to have a nice family barbecue. My family wanted to meet my sister's girlfriend and insisted that she brought her over, and we were all excited to meet her. So my sister's girlfriend seemed like a nice girl, but she was very standoffish. She kept to herself and didn't speak much to my parents and me. For the most part, she was just glued to my sister. This caused some awkward silence. I started asking about their relationship, how did they meet, how long have they been together, and I even joked about if she hurt my sister, blah, blah, blah. My parents started acting stranger by each question. I asked my mom what was wrong. Her response was, "This isn't right." I could tell my sister and her girlfriend were uncomfortable, and my dad tried to calm my mom down. My sister, probably fed up with being treated like shit for the past few years, spoke up and asked my parents what was the point of inviting them if she wasn't going to be okay with seeing them together. This caused my mom to explode with anger because she felt like my sister was being disrespectful, yada, yada, yada. So let's skip down to the bottom. I rationalized this whole situation with my parents. There were no use. They thought she was putting on a show in front of her girlfriend to make them look bad. They proceeded to say that they're allowed to be uncomfortable and feel differently than her. I explained to them that this is who she is. No one has agreed with it, but we still love her. I've tried talking to my sister about the whole situation, and apparently I defend our parents too much. Quote, I told her that our parents don't have to agree with her relationship, but they should. She told me that I'm being an asshole for expecting her to pretend it's someone else just because, or to be someone else, excuse me, just because our dad is dying. Am I the asshole? So, what is your perspective on this family situation here, Britt? And I know it was a mouthful. I apologize.
Well, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
There's a lot going on there and a lot to unpack. I think, well, let me say this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know so many things about this family.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I hear in that is a few different things. I think my first question is they have fallen into like the peacemaking role, it seems. And so I think that the question even, am I an asshole?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me wonder what they're looking for and what they're needing that they're not getting, right? So they obviously want to be of service to their family, and I'm actually not sure what they want in the end.
Yeah.
It's not clear. I think if what this family wants is, hey, we're not necessarily in close relationship, but we just want to be able to share a meal together before this dad passes away.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's, hey, we need everyone to come to the table and we want to be in close relationship, even though you're gay, and we're all just going to pretend like that's not a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are different premises, you know? So
Question. Do you think
Yeah.
that's even possible to have the latter? Not even just to have a meal before dad passes, but is it possible to have a, I guess, shallow relationship with family in which like your identity, like part of your identity is not even discussed or acknowledged? Is that even possible?
Oh, it's definitely possible. I think
Is
I've
it
got.
healthy?
Yeah. Well, it's you asked if it was possible. It's
You're
definitely possible.
right.
And you know what, this is what I always encourage people, like, away from simplicity, because it really
Yeah.
also depends on the dynamics of your family. So I have some friends who are like, it was never really that deep with my family. Like, we were
Mhm.
never the family to be sitting around and like, how are you really? And how's your.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it feels even more surface now that they're out and it's just kind of not something to talk about is something they're willing to do because they're like, that's how my family kind of operates, right? So that's one thing. Is it healthy? I don't know, but is a way that, again, I think even with family dynamics, there's this idea that there's like a right way to do it, or we need to do it well. And there are definitely some unhealthy things. Like,
Yeah.
never put yourself in unsafe situations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we all have family members who you're like, okay, there's a bunch of things I'm not going to talk about to make this interaction go well. And,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
when it is your identity, it changes the game a lot. And it also, I think the nature of the relationship. So I have a friend, I talk about him in the book, but was super close with his grandmother his whole life, like genuinely very connected.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came out, he's also someone who came out later in life. She was like, I don't agree. This isn't right. And so he's navigated a lot. Like, does that cancel? What does this mean?
Yeah.
This is a person who I have been connected and close with my entire life, who, picked me up after school, who made me forget it, who snuck me cookies when my parents weren't looking, who talked to me, who made sure I was okay, who checked in on me, who took me, all of these things. And so now he's asking himself if her feelings about his sexuality cancel all that out or not. And for that, I have no right answer. And for that, I don't know that he has a right answer. I think he's just going to be navigating that for the rest of the time that she's alive.
Yeah.
And that is just, it's just hard. There's no, I think even this person wanting to know, am I the asshole? It's like this, we're all looking to make sure we're on the right side of the line. Yeah. It's not a line, it's a web. You know what I mean? And you're just untangling it for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Ooh. And I think what like the overarching theme that we keep going back to in this conversation is just that it's all complicated. All of it is complicated. Mm-hmm. We as individuals are complicated, and then put us in a group together, of course, is even more complication. And I think that's okay. We try to simplify things. And I know I'm so guilty of this, trying to make things as simple as possible. But sometimes they aren't. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But this was such a good conversation. Thank you so much, Brit, for your time. I usually ask the guests what is a book recommendation, but I'm going to answer that for you. I'm going to recommend Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the problematic people in our lives are the ones we love by Brit Barron. Super, super excited for this to hit the shelves and for more people to get this in their hands. It's super timely, especially with all that's going on right now in the world. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Be Well Sis. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there's a link in the show notes. Be Well Sis is hosted by me, Dr. Cassandra Dunbar, and produced by Edit Audio. Don't forget to hit follow so you never miss an episode. Until next time, be well, sis.